This is a production of Cornell University.
So Dr. Amara Dunn is the Biocontrol Specialist with the New York State Integrated Pest Management Program, which is part of Cornell's College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. In this position, she supports the effective use of biological control solutions for pests in all agricultural commodities, as well as pests encountered by all New Yorkers, where they live, work, play, and learn. When she's not at work, she enjoys watching all the beneficial insects attracted to her flower garden. All right, thanks, Amara.
All right, so I like to let folks know when I start my talks that I consider myself to be someone who is experting in biocontrol. I spend a lot of time thinking about biocontrol, engaging with biocontrol, and reading about biocontrol, and maybe into scientific literature on biocontrol, but I don't know everything there is to know about biocontrol. And also, because I cover all of the agricultural commodities, I am not an expert in field crops. It's not something I work in exclusively the way some of the other folks are doing here today do. So I'm expecting to learn something from all of you today as well. So I want to start off with a question. And the question for you is, are you using biocontrols now? And the options, in a moment, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand. Options are yes, no, or I'm not sure. And I'm not sure is a perfectly reasonable answer because my title was Biocontrols, Biopesticides, Biostimulants. Oh my, what do these terms even mean? So if you don't know, that's okay. So how many people are already using biocontrols? How many feel like, nope, I'm not using biocontrols? How many are not sure if you're using biocontrols? And a lot of folks are just worn out. That's okay too. It's late in the day. It's been a gray month, year. All right, so here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start by going over these terms, the three big bio terms. What do they mean? We're going to chat a little bit about ways you might be using biocontrols, even if you're not sure that you are. And we're going to finish up with a little bit of information about biostimulants. I know some folks mentioned them already today. Please do ask questions. I'm happy to be interrupted. If you raise your hand, that's probably better than just shouting out. And I will ask you to participate a little bit as well. All right, so these bio terms, biocontrol, biopesticide, biostimulant, what's the difference? What do all these mean? And why do you care? Or maybe you don't care. Before we get into that, I like to define a few terms. I am not trained as an entomologist. And if there's any entomologists out there who know that insects are not the same as mice, right? But I'll use the word insect very broadly here, and I'll include some things that aren't technically insects, like mice or arachnids. I'll also use the word microbe, which just means bacteria, fungi, viruses, or microorganism. Pathogens are microbes that cause disease on plants. We're not talking about human pathogens today. I have no expertise there. And then I'll use the term pest to refer to both insects and plant pathogens that are causing damage to our crops. So biocontrol is using something living or something that a living thing produces to control pests. And lady beetles and aphids are a really acceptable example that most people are familiar with. So the lady beetle or the ladybug is the natural enemy, or the biocontrol agent is the pest or the aphid. But biocontrol is a whole lot more than just insects doing biological control or insects being controlled by biologicals. So that's where biopesticides come in. Biopesticides are pesticides, and their active ingredients can be plant extracts, they can be microbes, or they can be biostimulants, something like potassium bicarbonate. Like regular pesticides, they control pests. And this is going to be important in a moment. So in contrast to biopesticides, which control pests, biostimulants grow healthy plants. So they may contain similar things. Biostimulants are often made from plants or seaweed extracts, microorganisms, and some natural compounds. So the active ingredients may be very similar, but they have distinct purposes. Biopesticides are for controlling pests. Biostimulants are for growing healthier plants. Biostimulants are not currently registered with the EPA or your state DEC. That might change in the future. We don't know. We don't even have a firm established definition for biopesticides yet. There's some definitions that are being promoted and out there. Here's an example, because it does get a little bit complicated with biopesticides and biostimulants. So Fighter is a product that contains the fungus. The fungus is Clonostachys rosea. So fungus microorganism could be a biopesticide, could be a biostimulant. I was reading some information about this product online and I felt confused. So I have a lot of quotes here from the website describing the product. It says it's a beneficial microfungus. It enhances plant health and productivity. Sounds like a biostimulant. It offers protection against a variety of fungal pathogens, and it actively blocks the entry of those pathogens. Sounds like a biopesticide because it's controlling pests. It lists some diseases against which it's particularly effective. Even in the absence of these diseases, it'll stimulate the plant's natural resistance mechanisms or suppresses those diseases and stimulates the plant's resistance mechanisms. And then it explicitly says it's a biostimulant and it will aid your crops even if there's no disease. Now, I looked at the NICE, which is a go-to place for is the pesticide registered for use in New York State. It's not listed there, which either means it's a pesticide that's not registered in New York or it's not a pesticide. There is a strain of this fungus that's registered with EPA, or at least was back in 2019. So this is confusing, right? And this is not the only product out there that is confusing, that has kind of mixed messages about, is it making healthier plants? Is it controlling disease? So I just want to acknowledge that there is some complexity there. I also have this disclaimer because I'm a Cornell University employee. I have to make sure that I tell you that if you're using a product that's not labeled and registered as a pesticide, and in New York State, not labeled and registered on the crop and for the pest, that's an off-label pesticide application. I will never recommend off-label pesticide applications. If you are not already familiar with the Cornell Pesticide Safety Education Program, which is a part of the New York State AgChem program, they're a great resource if you have questions. If you find a product and you're interested in trying it and you're confused, is it a pesticide? Is it not a pesticide? What are the implications of my farm? They're not regulatory. They're great at answering questions. They can pass questions on anonymously to your state PEC. So I'm happy to connect you with them if you would like to get some more information. So if you're looking at the product and wondering, is it a biopesticide? This includes, first of all, pest control. If its purpose is pest control, the clue is a biopesticide as opposed to a biostimulant. When we think about the active ingredients that are in biopesticides, the microorganisms and the plant names are pretty easy to recognize. I can't always tell when I look at the name of a chemical if it's a natural biochemical or not. There is an official list with the EPA of which things are considered biopesticides, but the microbes and plant extracts are pretty easy to recognize. The EPA registration number is another really important clue because if it's a pesticide, it'll have a registration number. With one exception, which is why there's an asterisk here. So minimum risk pesticides don't have EPA registration numbers. So there's a specific list of active ingredients that are permitted in minimum risk pesticides. A lot of these are also plant extracts, which is confusing too, right? Because sometimes plant extracts are registered as pesticides, sometimes they're minimum risk pesticides. Thyme oil, citric acid, these are two examples. They are not currently registered with EPA or New York State DEC, so they won't have an EPA registration number. And because they're not registered, they haven't gone through that same process of evaluation. Sometimes the label will have a statement like you see up here that says they're exempt under section 25B of IFRA. So some people call them 25B products, but the label doesn't have to say that. So it's confusing. There is a great page about numerous pesticides through New York State AgChem, and I sent Kristen a list of links that she'll share with folks afterwards where you can read more about this. I'll mention this at the end too, but if there's anyone here who needs hard copies instead of accessing something online, I'll share my office phone number at the end, or come see me. I'll give you my business card. I'm happy to make sure you get hard copies too. Here's an important question. Should you care if it's a biopesticide or not? This is a reasonable question. In terms of whether it's a biopesticide or a biostimulant, I think this is really relevant in terms of laws about pesticide use. And they may be different in different states, right, Ohio versus New York. In terms of whether it's a biopesticide versus if it's an organic approved but not biopesticide, that may not be as important to you. Whether it's approved for use in organic production may be a more important question. So just want to acknowledge that. Some of this is semantics, but people want to know what is a biopesticide. Well, this is what it is. All right. Questions before we move on about biocontrols, biopesticides, biostimulants. Okay. How you might be using biocontrols already. And we're going to talk about 3 areas, conserving, releasing, and spraying. I know we don't talk about much in organic, but it might be something you're doing, that's okay. So if you think you are using biocontrol currently, and I did see a few hands, what are you doing? Yeah.
Well, I raised certified organic apples, and so I'm using a whole raft of these things. Everything from bicarbonate to ET to Bioseries, the very Bastiana, and there's just a whole mess of them. And in fact, one of the things that I was going to say was that the big problem is that I don't oftentimes believe that what the label says or what the manufacturer says on their website about efficacy. And the more we can find out about whether some of these things really work or not, the better off we get to do.
Yeah, so in case anyone didn't hear, sharing that we use a lot of different biopesticides in organic apple production, and also the importance of knowing whether these biopesticides work. And I 100% agree. We're going to address that a little bit, probably not as much as you want, because I have not done and have not read as many trials as I wish were out there in field crops. But I'll tell you what I know. Anyone else want to share biocontrols they're using or have used?
Fire foliar works pretty good, and that would be,
Sorry, in what crop?
that would be,
So foliar in beans?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
certain habitat traps.
Conserving habitat, yeah, we're gonna talk about that.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. And in fact, that's the first thing we're gonna talk about. So conserving insect natural enemies by creating habitat for them or just protecting them. So insect natural enemies are gonna help you with pest control, need the same things that every living thing needs. They need food, they need shelter, and they need protection from harm. I think a great opportunity for conservation biocontrol in an organic setting is you're already not using a lot of the chemicals that conventional farmers are using that are killing some of their natural enemies and so contributing to pest problems. So I think that's a great opportunity in organic production. It can fit well in the system in that you are the organic pesticides that are approved for use in organic agriculture are often going to have lower impacts on the insect natural enemies that are going to be helping pest control. At least in the past, there has also been some funding available through your local NRCS offices to help you establish, for example, perennial wildflowers that will help feed insects that help you with pest control. I have no idea if that is going to continue to be available in the future, but I encourage you to reach out to your local NRCS office if that's something that's of interest to you. There are some challenges, and this I think is a challenge really across agriculture is wanting to have a formula. I want to, tell me which flowers to plant, what area, how close to my crop, so that I will control my pests. And there's very few situations where we have a good formula of this is exactly how we need to provide habitat for insect natural enemies in order to get pest control. There's a few examples, but not too many of them. And then the other thing I wanted to point out was that just because something is organic approved does not mean it's going to not kill any arthropods or insects. And you're probably aware of that already, but just wanted to mention that. We could have a whole talk about conservation biocontrol, not today. There will be some more resources and the links that are going out. Here's one example. Oh, question.
This isn't specifically about what you were just talking about, but I just thought of a pheromone trap. We use pheromone traps to capture Indian meal moths. Where does that fit in your, is that a role, where would you fit in a pheromone trap?
So according to the EPA, pheromones are biopesticides.
Biopesticide.
Yes,
So
so,
the pheromone itself doesn't kill the insect, pulling the insect in to get it caught on a sticky tape,
yes.
killing.
Yeah, and it has to do with the definition of a pesticide, you know, for example, repellents, also pesticides, right? They're not killing the insect, they're repelling it. But pheromones are biopesticides. Yeah, so I have a Venn diagram, but I didn't show here today. So biocontrols would include insects and nematodes that kill pests and microbes that kill pests. The regulators have decided that if it's a microbe, a plant extract, or a biochemical, it's a biopesticide. Insects and nematodes are exempt from being regulated under FIFRA as pesticides, even though they also act as biopesticides. It's some of the semantics, right?
Yeah.
So here's an example of a biocontrol agent you might be conserving that's relevant in field crops. This is a tiny parasitoid wasp that attacks cereal leaf beetles. It was introduced to the US quite a while ago. It can be found in New York, but I'm told that it can be a little bit sporadic in its populations. You cannot buy it commercially right now. An interesting thing about the wasp is that its activity in this season, 2025, is going to impact the cereal leaf beetle population in 2026. So it's a situation which I think is a pretty common thing in organic production where you are thinking about the future. You know, you're doing things this year that are going to impact years down the road, your pest populations. And one of the ways you can conserve it is through reducing pesticide use and creating some areas in the farm where you're not using pesticides, which again, I think is a great opportunity on organic farms. All right, so we talked about conserving, releasing live biocontrol agents. So there's these would be live biocontrol agents that are not biopesticides. So we have predators, an insect eating another insect. I have a lady beetle picture here, but just for the record, I want to say I don't encourage releasing lady beetles out of the field. I'm not conserving them, bringing them in from other places. We have parasitoids, like that tiny wasp I just showed you. They're laying eggs in or on the pest that will then eat the pest from the inside out. And then we have entomopathogenic nematodes. So some nematodes are pests on plants, others eat insects. So these tiny nematodes collaborate with the bacteria that's inside the nematode. They invade the insect. Together with the bacteria, they kill the insect, reproduce. The insect gets full of more tiny nematodes, and then they go out into the soil and find more insects to eat. Pretty cool. An example of releasing biocontrol agents would be entomopathic nematodes for control of alfalfa snout beetle. This is something that I know has been used extensively, at least in northern New York, and they've had really good luck controlling alfalfa snout beetle this way, especially because it turns out that you can apply this mixture of nematodes that were first isolated from New York soils by Elson Shields at Cornell, and then they will persist in the soil. So you make one application and you're good to go, which is pretty unusual for biocontrols. There is some evidence that these nematodes can also feed on other soil-dwelling insects, and there's ongoing research to figure that out. For example, there's some evidence that this can help you with corn rootworms, but we don't know as much about those impacts yet as we do about the alfalfa. And there will be, again, a link in the resources that you're getting after the meeting if you want to read more about this. In the realm of releasing biocontrol agents, I want to mention a resource from the New York State Integrated Pest Management Program. So we are collecting a growing list of profiles on biocontrol agents. This is a picture of the page that's about Tetraspecus tulas, the cereal leaf beetle parasitoid. The goal with these profiles is to try to get practical information distilled into small chunks. So you get quick answers to the questions: does it work? Where do I use it? Can I buy it? Those sorts of things. So there's a QR code here, but there's also a link that'll be coming out in the resources as well. So we talked about conserving, we talked about releasing, and we're going to talk about spraying. I'm glad somebody mentioned using some of the biopesticides in fruit crops at least. So spraying biopesticides can sometimes feel a little bit like spraying regular pesticide. You can use a sprayer, but there's some nuances to it as well. So as we discussed before, biopesticides are made from these active ingredients, plant extracts, microbes, and biochemicals. They are still pesticides, which means that all of these things that you might think about if you're using a non-biopesticide apply to them as well. So reading the label is really important. They all have restricted entry intervals. They are often shorter than a non-biological or conventional pesticide, but they'll be on the label. Many of them are approved for use in organic production, but not all of them are, so that's an important thing to check. They will have information on the label about PPE that you have to wear when you're applying them. And then at the bottom of the slide, I wanted to point out that not all biopesticides are completely safe for all insects. So this is from a biopesticide label, and it notes that if you have direct contact between the biopesticide and bees, you can harm bees. So it tells you not to spray this when bees are foraging the crop. So again, really important to read the label. Just because it has bio in the name doesn't mean it's zero risk and it's harmless.
Any of the biopesticides, are there any of them like restricted use where they would require, you know, a DEC sprayer license?
I'm not aware of any biopesticides that are restricted use in agriculture, please. The example I'm thinking of is there's a biopesticide for bedbugs that you might need a license to be able to buy the product, but that's not relevant to the size. Yeah, go ahead. You do? Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's because biopesticides are such a big group. You would want to look at the product you're using and what the requirements are. Biopesticide modes of action. So some of the biopesticide modes of action are very similar to a non-biopesticide. You're just poisoning pests. Whether it's something extracted from a plant or something produced by a microbe or the microbe itself, you spray it on the insect, you spray it on the pathogen, you're killing it. We're pretty familiar with pesticides working that way. The picture on the right with the two yellow moths and no loves in the air, this is an example, this is my depiction of a pheromone, right? Because that's how pheromones work. They're mimicking the chemicals that insects produce to find mates. So you're disrupting that when you're using pheromones. Some of the insect bioinsecticide modes of action are also similar to some of the non-biological insecticide modes of action. So for example, you can have bioinsecticides that are going to stop insects from growing, insect growth regulators, that's the thing that is available in non-biological pesticides as well. We have repellents, and then some bioinsecticides will stop the insect from feeding days before the insect actually dies. And this is something that you'll see in often. And then there's some modes of action that are maybe more different from the non-biological pesticides. So I like to call this one over here EAT, where a fungus is eating an insect or eating another fungus. If you have ever heard of using contans, or I think it might have been named now, it's a fungus that eats the sclerotia of white mold. So you have one fungus that's eating another fungus. Some biopesticides are formulated with living microorganisms that grow over the surface of the plant, whether it's a leaf or root or fruit or flowers, and they take up so much space on the plant tissue that the pathogens can't find a place to land and start growing. And then there's some biopesticides and some non-biological pesticides too that will activate the plant's defenses, which is what I have attempted to show here with lightning bolts coming out of the plant. So you're priming the plant by exposing it to the biopesticide and turning on its defenses early so that when the pest shows up, the plant's better able to defend itself. And then this mode of action is complicated because we talked before about how biostimulants grow healthy plants and biopesticides control pests. But some biopesticides work by growing stronger and healthier plants. So the label will actually say, this biopesticide controls this pest because it grows a stronger plant. And that's confusing, right? Because biostimulants also grow stronger plants. It really just comes down to the stated purpose on the label and how the manufacturer has chosen to register or not register that product and the claims that they're making. There are more resources available on biopesticide modes of action. So I have 2 blog posts, one that focuses on biopesticides for plant diseases, one that focuses on biopesticides for insect pests. And those links will be in the resources as well. And I'm happy to share hard copies if anyone would like some. Why do you care about the active ingredient of a biopesticide or the mode of action? There's really important implications for how these products work. So for example, when you might want to use it. If you are trying to stimulate your plant defenses, and that's how the biopesticide works, you have to get it on in enough time before the pest shows up that you can have that defense activation. Also, it's important because it has implications for what success looks like. So for example, if a biopesticide is going to stop insect feeding, but the insects might not die for 3 to 7 days, if you go out into the field 2 days later and your insects aren't dead, did it work or did it not work, right? So knowing how a product works can tell you how to use it so that you're most likely to see results and also what success is going to look like. And then knowing whether the active ingredient in a biopesticide is alive is really important because there's some important implications for how long it's going to last. So how much product are you buying? How long can you keep it before it's going to start losing efficacy? How you should store it. There are some biopesticides that are actually supposed to be stored either in a refrigerator or a freezer, which is an important thing to keep in mind. And you know, I'm sure this happens, but technically, if it's stored in a refrigerator or freezer, it should be a refrigerator or freezer that's only used for pesticides, right? Because you're not storing pesticides with other things. How often does that happen, right? So just being aware, but you know, you don't want to spend a lot of money on a product, store it improperly, and then have it on. So knowing that ahead of time is important, yeah.
Make sure on the shipping, when it's shipped, it's still under those conditions that has.
Yes, absolutely, checking the shipping as well. I know when folks, so releasing insect biocontrol agents is really common in greenhouse production, and it's often recommended when your live insects come in to check the temperature of the box, right? To make sure that they didn't go out of range and shipping. And then also with the live microbes, there's some implications for the optimal conditions when you're doing the application as well, whether it's the pH of the tank, or the time of day or things like that. I wish I had more of these made. I only have 11 so far. I started putting together these biopesticide profiles because there are a lot of details about biopesticides that can make a big difference if you're thinking about using the product. Things like its shelf life, how you should store it, how it works. How does it do in UV, right? How long is it going to be able to withstand sunlight outside? Is there an optimal temperature range to use it? These are not meant to replace a label, obviously, but the goal was to get some of that practical information in one place so that you as a grower are tracking down EPA registration documents and brochures from the manufacturer and the product label when you're trying to figure out how to do something. So there'll be links to these as well in the emails coming from Kristen, and I can get you hard copies if you'd like. All right. And this is what you really want to know. Do biopesticides work? And I don't have a great answer for you. I wish I had a much better answer for you. And I'm going to explain to you why I don't have a better answer for you, why it's complicated. So something that I spent a lot of time on is I look through replicated research trials to collect efficacy data on biopesticides. I try to rotate through all the crops, which means at the moment the field crops spreadsheet is a couple years old. It's on the list for this year. I did do a quick search to see what I could find about some things like fusarium head blight or potentially seed pests in corn and soybeans. I will say there was nothing that jumped out to me that's like, wow, this 100% works. You should definitely try this product. But I am collecting this information so that it is more available and easier to find later. These are on our website, we'll link to them as well. Like I said, this is a few years out of date, but I work on keeping them updated. There are not nearly as many trials in field crops for biopesticides as there are in fruit and vegetables, and that is unfortunate. I did find this article, which was interesting. So this is a meta-analysis of 56 studies focusing on fusarium, head blight, and wheat. And they were, the studies were all looking at microbial biocontrol agents. So things that could be in biopesticides. However, I will say none of these studies were actually looking at formulated biopesticides. So there's a big difference sometimes between a researcher mixes up a microbe and applies it in a crop and gets a result versus what happens if that microbe actually makes it to be formulated and commercially available. The other thing, this paper, the goal was to look at overall patterns and efficacy of all of these microbial biocontrols. So there wasn't like this microbial biocontrol agent definitely works. And in looking through the list of microbes they looked at, very few of the ones they looked at are commercially available right now, as far as I know, which is unfortunate and a challenge unless the pace of science is slow sometimes. But there were some interesting patterns in this review. So if you look at this chart here, this middle line is no different from doing nothing at all. And in general, overall, the biocontrol agents did tend to reduce disease. We looked at all those studies together. They maybe had a slight impact on yield, and I know there were several other studies here today that showed some changes in pest pressure or some changes in pest numbers, but not necessarily yield. A lot of them also reduced toxins. Mostly what they looked at was non-toxins in these studies. But it was also really complicated. And this is the thing that happens a lot when we talk about biocontrols and biopesticides. So for example, they looked at studies that compared wheat cultivars that were very susceptible to fusarium head blight and wheat cultivars that were less susceptible. And they found that the biocontrol agents, the biopesticide active ingredients, reduced disease and increased yield more in the highly susceptible varieties. But you got better non-toxin reduction in the less susceptible varieties. So that's confusing and complicated. That's what they found. They also found some interesting differences, and again, it's complicated in terms of when you apply the microbial biocontrol agent. And each microbial biocontrol agent is going to do different things, right? So each one, you know, maybe it is better applied to seed, or maybe it is better applied to the actual wheat head. They found that in general, when you make the application at antithesis compared to a seed treatment, you boosted yield. However, if you apply to seeds or kernels, you're more likely to reduce DON than if you apply antithesis. You could still reduce the DON production if you apply antithesis, but the effect wasn't as big. So the point is, it's complicated. I wish it was less complicated. I wish it was more straightforward. My bottom line in biopesticides is I do think that there's a lot of promise to them, but I don't know enough right now to confidently tell you you should go out and buy this product. I think we definitely need more research, and I think it is probably also going to be a situation where you'll try some things out on your farm and have experiences and see what you like and what works well for you. I am always happy to talk more about this. And to do some more digging in the literature, if you have some specific questions, I'll share my contact information at the end. I did want to mention too, I don't know if any of you have heard my colleague Ken Wise speak about some of the immunity alternatives research. You're probably aware there's a lot of information now and energy around finding alternatives to neonicotinoid insecticides, and I think some of that may be beneficial to the organic community as well. So as we're investigating alternative seed treatments or some cultural controls or models that are going to predict when seed corn maggot pressure is going to be at highest, I think that'll all be useful. We don't have answers for it yet. We are working on it, and I'm hoping that there'll be some more good information coming out of this. biostimulants. Wanted to wrap up with just a little more information about biostimulants. So this is the latest I could find proposed definition, but not finalized. So that's one of the challenges with biostimulants. There's not even an official definition for them, which means they're not regulated, and that can lead to a lot of variability amongst products or amongst batches of the same product. I mentioned before plant and seaweed extracts, microbes, and other natural chemicals. This is kind of a more detailed list. The top 4 are the kind of more common active ingredients you'll see in biostimulants. So seaweed extracts, even in and of itself, is really broad, and there can be a lot of variability depending on where the seaweed was harvested from or how it's processed. Humic and fulvic acids are the more common carbon-based acids that can be in biostimulants. They're just byproducts of organic material decomposing, which you may have already a lot on your farm anyway. Protein hydrolysates, really hard time saying that word, are just proteins broken into pieces. You can break them into pieces with acids or bases or enzymes, and also the protein source that you're breaking up can vary a lot. And I'm told that depending on what the source of the protein is, can determine whether it's approved for organic production or not. So again, just like with the biopesticides, it's really important to check about the product that you're using. Microbes, and then also in addition to that, plant extracts, enzymes, chitosan, carbohydrates. This is a big, I think, over time, we're going to continue to get more and more information about biostimulants and how we can be using them. Just a couple things to keep in mind. There is a lot of variability in terms of the source of materials, even within those groups, in terms of the extraction methods and between batches, and all of those things can impact how well the products work and if they work on your farm. I mentioned already the organic approval. If it's a live microbe, obviously you want to think about storage and shelf life. And then this last point I think is an interesting one, because a lot of these biostimulants work by increasing the plant's ability to be resilient in the face of stress. If you use these products in multiple years, but some years are more stressful for your plant than others, you might expect to see more of an impact when the plant experiences stress than when it doesn't. So in some ways, it's a little bit of insurance because you can't always predict when your plants are going to experience stress, but just another complication to be aware of. And I know it's late, but my contact information is here, including my phone number, in case you'd like to get in touch, and I appreciate your attention at the meeting today.
Do you have any questions for Amara?
Question for Todd or sterility.
Yes, yes,
Are you familiar with the use of that problem?
a little. So contents for sclerotinia, I have heard that some people have had success using it for white mold and soybeans. But I've also heard that it's a situation where it probably works better if you apply it year after year after year, because you're degrading sclerotia in the soil, and so you're reducing your population of the white mold pathogen in the soil over time. I've also heard it's pretty expensive. Those are the things I know about. It also can be, I do have one of those biopesticide profiles about it. I think the timing is tricky. It's because it's a live fungus, and because you have to get it in touch with those sclerotia in the soil and not dry out, the timing is a little bit finicky about getting into the field.
Pre-plant corporate.
Yes, although I've also heard it suggested to do a fall application. So I think that's potentially an option, but I'm happy to get your contact information and remind myself of those details.
A number of years ago, someone.
Yes, yep. I think Keith Waldron had looked at that a little bit in field crops, and also Colleen Diller has looked at it in vegetables for snap beans. Yeah, I think it can work. It can be a little finicky and it's expensive.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.